Dear students, in this video session, we will discuss about the Second Republic of France 1848 to 1852. The Second Republic was established in France in 1848. It was replaced by the Second Empire and ultimately gave rise to the Third Republic in the long run. In 1848, a revolution broke out in France in the month of February against the July monarchy, which was established in 1830. This was the third revolution in the history of France. Louis Philippe, discerning the perverted atmosphere of the country, made up his mind to resign. He immediately abdicated the throne of France in favor of his grandson, the Count of Paris, and then fled to England. After the successful revolution of 1848, the revolutionists and patriots were not ready to accept the monarchy. So they decided to establish the republican government in the country. Lamartine, one of the prominent leaders of the revolution, proclaimed the Republic on 26 February 1848 in the next words. Royalty is abolished, the Republic is proclaimed, the people will exercise their political rights. In this way, the Second Republic was born of the Revolution of 1848. It was established with great fanfare, but it lasted for a short period of 5 years only. Owing to the differences and the mutual struggle of the socialists and the republicans, the newly established democratic government could not stand. The constitution framed by the Constituent Assembly gave opportunity to Louis Napoleon to become the president of the republic. He took full advantage of the name of Bonaparte, and after introducing important changes in the constitution, he became instrumental in destroying the Second Republic in 1852. The chief events occurred in France from 1848 to 1852. We describe the chief events that occurred in the France during the regime of Second Republic. These events greatly helped Louis Napoleon in becoming the real master of France. In addition, these events also led to the downfall of the Second Republic and the establishment of the Second Empire in France. Just after the proclamation of the Second Republic, a provisional government was formed in France in order to hold the elections for the National Assembly. The provisional government declared that, in the name of the French people, monarchy, under every form, is abolished without possibility of return. This new government was composed of two elements. The majority of the members were Republicans who wanted to establish a Republican form of government in place of the monarchy. This group was led by Lamartine. The other element also believed in the Republic, but as a means to introduce the social and economic reforms in the country. This group of members, led by Louis Blanc, wanted to improve the condition of the laboring classes by the famous socialistic theory known as the right to employment. Louis Blanc was against the private property. He and his supporters wished to establish cooperative productive associations in the country. On the contrary, Lamartine was opposed to the removal of the property in order to solve the economic problems of the country. He remarked charity among the different classes of citizens to be realized by all such institutions of assistance, association, benevolence as are compatible with the liberty of capital and the security of property. In this way, the provisional government was from the very beginning divided into two different groups. One group supported a mere political change in France, while the other, namely socialistic group, was in favor of the thoroughgoing reconstitution of society in the interest of the largest and the weakest class, the poor and the wage earners. In spite of the disparate groups aiming in contrary directions, the provisional government, under the pressure of the socialists, recognized the right to employment. In order to remove unemployment, the new government, against its own real wishes, promised work to all citizens, and it established the national workshops for this purpose. The factories were started by the state aid throughout the country in which the unemployed were given employment. The government fixed a uniform rate wages for the laborers, 2 francs a day. This scheme of the socialists soon proved counterproductive because, as a matter of fact, the workshops were not the centers of production, but they were merely the centers of relief where the unemployed and the idlers came the take shelter. The number of those flocking TC these workshops increased alarmingly. There were only 25,000 laborers in these workshops in March 1848, but this number increased up to 1 lakh in May 1848. The government bent over backward to satisfy the laborers. It had to reduce the working days for each man to 2 a week, and the wages were fixed at 8 francs per day. The consequences of this policy of the socialists were neither in favor of the newly established republic nor the socialists themselves. Many factories were closed down, and it all proved the failure of the socialists. As regards the nature of the national workshops and their consequences, C.D. Hagen has observed, Louis Blanc wished to have every man practice his own trade in real factories, started by state aid. They should be engaged in productive enterprises. Instead of this, the government simply set men the most varied sorts to labor upon unproductive tasks. This was properly no system of production, but was merely a system of relief for the unemployed, who were very numerous owing to the fact that many factories had to close because of the generally distributed state of affairs. This experiment wasted the public money, accomplished nothing useful, and led to a street war of the most appalling kind. The provisional government also established a labor commission at Luxembourg. Louis Blanc was appointed the head of this commission. It recommended the establishment of industrial associations throughout the country, but it had no financial power. Owing the lack of finances and the financial power, the commission became a mere debating society that investigated the economic problems and reported to the government. It had no power of action or of putting its opinions into execution. In this way, the scheme of Louis Blanc failed uh, disastrously. The National Constituent Assembly. The provisional government was only a temporary organization which was established for the administration of France pending the elections of the National Assembly and the framing of a constitution by the new assembly. In those days, as we have seen, the socialist leaders were busy in providing more employment to the laborers and the unemployed. They could not devote their time to propagating their principles among the people. On the contrary, the Republicans devoted their attention to the people, preparing them for the elections. The universal suffrage was established by the provisional government in France. Consequently, the political power passed from the hands of the 2 lakh rich and privileged persons to over 90 lakh persons. In other words, all the adult males of France were given the right to elect the members of the National Assembly. The elections were held on April 23, 1848 for 900 members of the Assembly, as the common people were greatly influenced by the working system of the Republicans. They voted in favor of their candidates. Consequently, an overwhelming majority of the Republicans was established in the National Assembly. Out of the 900 members, about 800 were Republicans. The socialists had thus almost disappeared. The first meeting of the National Constituent Assembly was held on May 4, 1848, as the Republicans were in absolute majority. The Republic was again proclaimed in France with great fervor. An executive committee was formed, formed consisting of 5 members in order to tackle the contemporary problems of the country. It was strange that none of the socialists was made the members of the executive committee. Even Louis Blanc was not made it member. All this made it clear that the assembly was in favor of the republic, but it was against the socialistic republic. Although the Republicans had achieved victory over the Socialist Republicans, they were so fearful that they found themselves unable to administer the country without the help of the army. That is why the dictatorship of Cavaignac was continued for the next 4 months. By the end of October 1848, the conflict of the Republicans versus the Socialists had weakened the roots of the Second Republic. The framing of the Constitution. The main work of the Constituent Assembly was to frame a constitution for the country. So, after suppressing the socialist agitation, the Assembly framed a constitution in which provision was made for the formation of a legislative assembly consisting of 750 members to be elected for 3 years on the basis of the universal suffrage. It was also decided that the power of the executive should be centered in the hands of the president, who was to be elected directly by the voters for 4 years. But the above process introduced by the constitution was defective, since both the legislative assembly and the president were to be elected directly by the voters. There was the probability that the president and the legislator would try to become more powerful, and thus they would come into mutual conflict. In addition, no qualification was laid down in the constitution for the eligibility of the candidates for the post of president. Since no restriction was imposed upon the candidate of those who were related to any dynasty, such persons could take full advantage of the opportunity and make themselves the real masters of France. The election of the president. According to the provisions of the constitution, the election for the post of president was held on December 10th, 1848. Although there were 5 candidates for this post, the real struggle was between 2 candidates. One was General Cavaignac, who was the candidate of the Democratic Republicans. He had successfully suppressed the revolt of the Socialists in June 1848. The other candidate was Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. The Republicans failed to agree upon a candidate, hence there were 4 candidates of the Republican Party. Louis Napoleon took full advantage of the destiny of the Republicans. He was supported by the Legitimists, the Orleanists, the Bonapartists, and above all by the common people living in the rural area. Cavaignac was an influential personality. He was now hated by the working men for his role in the June days. The laborers and the socialist leaders also supported Napoleon. He also took full advantage of the famous name of his ancestor, Napoleon Bonaparte. In the election manifesto, it was clearly stated the name of Bonaparte is a program in itself. The same blood flows in the veins of Louis Napoleon, which was present in the veins and Great Napoleon. Thus, Napoleon will again help France to climb those peaks of glory and prestige on which Napoleon had seated France. Thus, the circumstances favored Louis Napoleon very much. When the president election was held in December 1848, he was elected with 54 lakh 34,226 votes to Cavaignac's 14 lakh 48,107. Lamartine, the prominent leader of the Republicans, could get only 18,000. On December 20, 1848, Louis Napoleon entered upon his duties as the President of the Second Republic of France. Thank you.